The confusion and anger over the Comey firing keeps building, and the lies, well, they keep piling up. We will fill you in on a very disturbing and busy day. Closer to home, Penn Station, it's going from bad to worse. We will take a look at how bad it's actually gotten and the plans to finally try and fix it. Then we will end the week with some drama like we needed any more of it, but not the Washington kind. Legendary critic John Simon, he will review the new musical War Paint starring Patti LuPone. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. A little bit of everything this evening. I'm Richard French, and thank you so much for joining us on yet another busy Friday. Now, with so much going on, we wanted to make you a part of the program here, and we're going to be bringing in some of your comments that you've sent in earlier this week as it relates to reaction to really an unprecedented week, at least in the last 30-some-odd years. But the day, well, it started off what else but with Donald Trump on his Twitter feed sending out some of the most alarming ones to date. One that appears to threaten the man that he just fired, one James Comey. Take a listen. James Comey, better hope there are no tapes of our conversations before he starts leaking to the press. Well, Press Secretary Sean Spicer, as you'd imagine, was asked about this seemingly mafia threat here that was laid out in the first news conference that he's been at since the whole Comey imbroglio started when he was terminated this week. And Mr. Spicer, well, he decided to stonewall with an interesting non-denial denial. Take a listen.
Did President Trump record his conversations with former FBI Director Comey?
I assume you're referring to the tweet, and I've talked to the President. The President has nothing further to add on that.
Why did he say that? Why did he tweet that? What should we interpret from that?
As I mentioned, the President has nothing further to add on that.
Are there recording devices in the Oval Office or in the residence?
As I said for the third time, there is nothing further to add on that.
You know, people have been using the term Nixonian, recording conversations in the White House, the tapes. We'll get to more on that coming up. In another early morning tweet, and the President was busy this morning, he addressed the accusations that his press people lie to the press that is covering them. Quote, as a very active president with lots of things happening, it's not possible for my surrogates to stand at the podium with perfect accuracy. Oh, and there's an exclamation point there. Maybe the best thing to do would be to cancel all future press briefings and hand out written responses for the sake of accuracy. My God. President Trump was then asked about that very issue by one Jeanine Pirro. You may remember the Westchester County executive, now a personality on Fox News. And this interview will air tomorrow night on that network. When asked about this, he doubled down on what he tweeted. Take a listen.
Are you moving so quickly that your communications department cannot keep up with you?
Yes, that's true.
So what do we do about that?
We don't have press conferences, and we do...
You don't mean that.
Well, just don't have them. Unless I have them every 2 weeks and I do myself. We don't have them. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah,
First of all, you have a level of hostility that's incredible, and it's very unfair. Sarah Huckabee is a lovely young woman. You know Sean Spicer. He is a wonderful human being. He's a nice man.
The president doesn't tell the truth to his staff. They end up giving messaging that are lies. But it's the fault of the press to take the information that his own administration is giving them because he's so busy, according to Jeanine Pirro. But I go on. The president remaining loyal to his communication, folks, as you heard here, but he also reportedly asked James Comey during that now infamous dinner that it turns out, by the way, that Donald Trump requested, for a loyalty pledge to the commander-in-chief. Comey refused. Now the Government Ethics Office is chiming in on that. Released this following statement, quote, public service is a public trust requiring employees to place loyalty to the Constitution, the laws, and ethical principles above private gain, period, end quote. Of course, the president is now denying he ever asked Comey for loyalty. Take a listen.
People suggest that the question that apparently the New York Times is selling, that you asked Comey whether or not you had his loyalty, was possibly inappropriate. Could you see how they would think that?
I read that article. I don't think it's inappropriate.
Did you ask that question?
No, No, I didn't. But I don't think it would be a bad question to ask. I think loyalty to the country, loyalty to the United States is important. You know, I mean, it depends on how you define loyalty. Number one. Number two, I don't know how that got there because I didn't ask that question.
Forget about whether you trust anything he says or not. We'll get more into the volume of lies in the last week. But nonetheless, that he doesn't find anything wrong with asking a FBI director if he has loyalty to the president. We just read what the government ethics defines as the job here of a public servant. Loyalty to a president versus loyalty to country are two completely different things, and I refer you once again to Tricky Dick Richard Nixon, okay? All this segues perfectly, however, into what our senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman, is going to spell out. The lies that the president and his administration have been telling all week. I'm not going through the 100-plus days here. I'm talking about this week, just surrounding Jim Comey's firing. And Andrew, sad as it is, it took the better part of a day to put it together.
It took most of the day, and if I had had another day, I could have put together even more, because there were a lot this week, Rich. Only the president and his closest staff know whether their inaccuracies this week were an overt attempt to mislead the American public on the Comey firing, or just the end result of being kept so far from the loop on what really happened. But in a lot of ways, that's a distinction without a difference, because no matter why they said what they said, they were all going off White House talking points, which means even if they were honest inaccuracies from the individuals, that means the White House was still lying. Speaking with the most glaring lie, the reason that James Comey was fired. In a series of 3 letters released Tuesday, President Trump and Attorney General Jeff Sessions said the firing was based on the recommendation of Assistant AG Rod Rosenstein. Rosenstein's memo outlined Comey's errors in handling the Hillary Clinton email story during last year's campaign. But when the White House used that memo as the rationale to fire Comey, Rosenstein was reportedly so upset he was on the verge of resigning. And it was President Trump, in his letter firing Comey, that cemented the link between the decision and the Rosenstein memo. Quote, "I have received the attached letters from the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General of the United States recommending your dismissal as the director of the FBI. I have accepted their recommendation, and you are hereby terminated and removed from office effective immediately." Trump gave no other rationale at the time. That was Tuesday. On Thursday, President Trump insisted his mind was already made up before that memo, meaning his letter to Comey was at best incomplete or inaccurate.
Monday, you met with the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein.
Right.
Did you ask for a recommendation?
What I did is I was going to fire Comey. My decision. It was not.
You had made the decision before they came in the room.
I was going to fire Comey. There's no good time to do it, by the way.
Because in your letter you said I accepted their recommendation,
yeah, well,
so you had already made the decision.
I was going to fire regardless of recommendation.
So there was.
I was going to fire him regardless of recommendation. But Trump was far from the only one lying about the reasons and timing of Comey's firing. In a press release Tuesday, Press Secretary Sean Spicer singled out only one reason for Comey's firing. President Trump acted based on the clear recommendations of both Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Mr. President, your thoughts?
I was going to fire regardless of recommendation.
So there was.
Now even the Vice President, Mike Pence, got caught up in it.
President Trump made the right decision at the right time, and to accept the recommendation of the Deputy Attorney General and the Attorney General to ask for the termination, to support the termination of the Director of the FBI.
Let's fact check that claim from the Vice President. For that, we turn to Donald from Manhattan. Donald?
I was going to fire regardless of.
All right, the other big lie from the White House this week, that Comey had lost the confidence of everyone else at the FBI. Selling that line fell to Deputy Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
I think that was just another one of the many reasons that he was no longer had the confidence of the president or the rest of the FBI. I've heard from countless members of the FBI that are grateful and thankful for the president's decision, and I think that we may have to agree to disagree. I'm sure that there are some people that are disappointed, but I've certainly heard from a large number of individuals, and that's just myself, and I don't even know that many people in the FBI.
I've heard from countless people in the FBI. I've heard from a large number of people in the FBI. Now, ignoring for a moment that if FBI agents were texting or emailing the White House to complain, as Huckabee Sanders said, those complaints would be official records the White House could have released but didn't, and those messages would be accessible to anyone filing a Freedom of Information request, but nothing's been released. But there are zero press reports backing up that story. Actually, there is one press story, and it's from the website LifeZet, which was created by conservative commentator and Trump supporter Laura Ingraham. And the only story they have about FBI morale as a result of Comey came back in July, right after Comey's first foray into the Clinton email investigation. The claim was also rejected by someone else with a little bit of inside knowledge about how the FBI works, the man now running the FBI, Acting Director Andrew McCabe.
Is it accurate that the rank and file no longer supported Director Comey?
No, sir, that is not accurate. Director Comey enjoyed broad support within the FBI and still does to this day.
One final point on the Comey loss, the FBI claim, specifically on all those emails and texts that Ms. Huckabee Sanders claimed to have received. Matt Apuzzo, a veteran reporter for the New York Times, posting online, quote, "I have covered the FBI for more than a decade. The chance of countless agents calling the White House to complain about their director and being routed to the deputy press secretary is precisely 0%. Rich? Where do you start?
Well, I start with a basic premise, which is we sit here in the middle of May, 4 months into this president's administration, and I can say without exaggeration or fake news or whatever you want to call it, there's a problem believing anything he says anymore. And moreover, when his staff speaks, you have zero confidence that it is with any form of coordination with the White House and that it's based on any form of fact. It's not just that they were giving out misinformation. They embellished on more than one occasion. You just pointed out what Ms. Huckabee over there did as it relates with the FBI and all the impossibilities of her statements, let alone the lack of factuality to it. But we are sitting here and we cannot believe what the president or a surrogate say. We're going to get into the legality of this. I'm going to talk to an FBI agent coming up soon as to what is or isn't going on there, where the investigation may be challenged going forward, because I don't think there's any line they won't cross. But more than all that, Andrew, the basic idea that we can't trust anything they're saying, and they're 4 months into their administration, is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And it's not an exaggeration.
No, it's really not. And you and I have had this conversation many, many times. It really does. I mean, we have to cover the president, but it's hard to take seriously anything that he says. And it's been this way for some time already. It's just now the severity of the topics, it's getting more serious.
I'm going to state the opposite. He's the president of the United States. He's the most powerful man on the planet. And we are saying without equivocation, when he tweets at 6 in the morning, when he gets in front of a camera for an interview, when he does a press conference, when he deigns to do those, we can't believe anything he says.
And then he uses the instruments of his office to try to get backup for the things that he says that he can't prove. You want to go back to the inauguration photos? And he had the National Park Service try to issue claims. He tried to pressure them into issuing claims. Or, you know, the claims about wiretapping at Trump Tower during the transition and during the campaign. That's one of the big problems that he had with James Comey, is that Comey flatly rejected those claims. He was pressuring the FBI to try to get backup on some of the more outlandish things that he says.
He didn't deny, Andrew, that he wanted a vow of loyalty. Mm-hmm. Now, he tried to nuance it to the country. But please, let's stand back for a second. Whatever you think of Director Comey, okay, and there's many legitimate issues people may have had and how he handled competing investigations right before the election. I grant you all that. His service to country versus Donald Trump's, the idea, just for a second, sit back and think. First of all, we know Trump has lied about so many elements that Andrew laid out. One other one was, we already know definitively that it wasn't Comey who asked to have dinner with the president. The president issued the invitation. And apparently, Comey was circumspect about going, but then pressured. So he goes. The president also acknowledged that he says to Comey, well, let's talk about your job tenure. He then talks about, well, am I the subject of your investigation? And then asks if he's loyal to the president or loyal, as he said, to America. Like, you have to question that of Jim Comey, the man who's investigating you for possible cooperation with the Russians. My point is only this. He's saying all these things. It's not opining. And we're sitting here and we're and he's asking us to choose to trust between him or Jim Comey. Who do you think the American public believes?
Well, I think a large part of the public still believes, it's a minority part, but the whole thing that we've been hearing about fake news, the assault on fake news, we thought it was a campaign technique when he was running. This is to try to get people to not believe, or to at least to question the kinds of reporting that we're seeing. Universally, on everything except conservative media, is coming around and backing up all of these points about his misstatements and about the timeline and about the loyalty pledge and all the pushback on Comey. But to his base, the whole fake news taint is designed for these kinds of moments.
But we talk about that base as if it is a divided America half and half. I suggest people, we did this early in the week, look at the Quinnipiac poll. It shows you politically by party who they support. It tells you, and certainly it's bad news for Republicans. Republicans even acknowledge as much. They certainly have poor ratings for the president. But when they do word association with the president, you have to look at the words that they use for them. Some of them I cannot say on TV. Huge numbers are doing this. But my final point about all of this, Andrew, is the president acknowledged today that when his press secretaries come and tell us what's going on about important things like the state of investigation or firing the FBI, when they're not telling us, they don't know why we think it's a big deal, even though it's only happened twice, since 1970, that he also believes they shouldn't be held to the standard of truth, and that the answer to combat the issue about the lack of truthfulness from the administration is not to talk to the press anymore. To me, we have lowered the curb and the expectation on what we want out of a White House. I want to leave somebody with a thought. Imagine if President Obama's first 100 days were anything like this. Just imagine for a moment what would be going on in Washington. And with that, and the questions of Comey and Trump here, Andrew, thank you very much. And for more on all this, let's bring in our guest to get the FBI perspective. Joining us now, former FBI agent Nancy Savage. She's executive director of the Society of Former Special Agents of the FBI. Nancy, thank you so much for the time.
Happy to be here.
Well, we just played basically the competing sound bites from that of the administration and the president saying that Comey had lost all confidence and respect of the Bureau. And then we also heard from the acting director who said it was completely the opposite. In fact, that the rank and file supported Comey, and they were stunned by the developments. What's your understanding of how the Bureau felt about, now its former director?
I mean, the active duty agents and our associate members, we probably have close to 1,000 members that are active duty agents. The ones that I've heard of are very dismayed. Not only were they extremely upset over the unprofessional methodology that was used in the dismissal notification, but they were very upset to be losing their director. Director Comey enjoyed and still enjoys, to my knowledge, a very high degree of respect, and he was a leader that was well respected in the FBI, and I think everyone feels pretty much sucker punched.
Let me get to the optics, if I could, Nancy, because two questions on that front. One is, not only, I think by all accounts, was he terminated in such a more than dismissive, humiliating way, literally when he's going to the LA office and he's there recruiting agents, and they have to point out to him that on a TV behind him, he was fired. But more than that, the optics of what he said, in effect kicking him when he's down, that he was a showboat, that he was grandstanding talking about Comey was the president, and he said he better hope there's no tapes. I can only imagine what's going on at the department right now. If he'll do that to their boss, what will he do to them?
I mean, he enjoyed a wide degree of respect when he served in several different Department of Justice offices as United States Attorney and a career prosecutor. So this is a man who's really been a career federal employee for a long time, enjoyed respect, universal respect during his confirmation, and throughout his careers and his interaction with the FBI and the Department of Justice. So that type of behavior on the part of the administration is very dismaying at the best to the FBI employees. I mean, I've also been asked, is it going to change how they investigate? Absolutely not. I mean, the FBI is set up as any good organization to have chains of command and have alternates there. I'm sure that Andy McCabe has stepped into the shoes and is doing everything he can to continue operations. Investigations, active investigations, are not going to be impacted by this because the investigative function is distributed to the field offices, and they're going to continue on just like they always have.
A question, this is partially optics, but also critical in that, as you stressed, the important independence that the FBI should enjoy. To that end, and again, this is what the president said, there's no divining here. President invites the FBI director to the White House for dinner. Over the course of the conversation, he talks about his future employment and also asks if he's the subject of the investigation. Regardless of how and what the communication, the response is from the FBI director, there's also reports that he was asked to give a vow of loyalty. As a former agent, but also just as somebody who understands how the rule of law works and the concern about the people charged with upholding it, talk about, to your end, how troubling, if in fact that's accurate, and a lot of that came from the president himself in the Lester Holt interview, that would be.
I mean, the director of the FBI, like all FBI employees, takes an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. That's where the loyalty lies. As I said, we're an apolitical organization. I can tell you, FBI agents and analysts and all the support employees, feel very strongly about remaining apolitical, even in difficult situations. And our oath is to the American people and the U.S. Constitution.
To that end, there is concerns that, let's say hypothetically, that something comes out of this investigation and charges were to move forward in some capacity. Do you have any reservations right now that if it went through into this Justice Department under this AG and seemingly the willingness to politicize things from the executive office, that we could have a compromised prosecution, if you will, here, even if the FBI does its job?
I think there's going to be on this particular case, there's going to be a pretty good spotlight on it. I have absolute full confidence that the FBI would do their job and present a very, very thorough and complete and exhaustive prosecutive report to the Department of Justice. I believe in this particular case, there's a lot of additional oversight by both the House and the Senate. So it's going to be before the American, it's going to be beyond the Department of Justice. It's not going to solely rest there. So I think it's going to turn out, the way it should turn out.
Nancy Savage, thank you so much. I really appreciate the perspective.
All right, take care.
And up next, more on the firing of Comey and the fallout, including how that's caused the president to even threaten to cancel the White House press briefings. We'll hash all that out with Dominic and Andrew.